So real quick, I want to overview the list of questions that I was asking to Gemini today about some of my biggest existential questions. All right, so I was asking Gemini about ways that I could publish my work because I feel a lot of urgency. If I had only 3 months to live, I would be extremely focused on trying to publish my work. And yet at the same time, there's this problem where I don't want to dump everything out. I want there to be relevant snippets. And yet at the same time, I don't have the time or the energy to create the relevant snippets or to curate things. And that makes me think that curation is not the right way to go. So I was talking with Gemini about this. And that was the first question that I asked it. How do I publish without overwhelming people? And then we were talking about who would be interested in my raw notes. And Gemini seems to think that some researchers might be interested in my raw notes. I don't think that that is true personally. And then thinking about if I was going to dump my raw notes, because my notes are a continuous flow of consciousness, it would be really problematic to dump the raw notes because there's a lot of private information in my raw notes. So we talked about ways to fix that problem, and probably the right way to do it is just to really quick run it through an AI filter to remove anything that sounds too personal, redact anything that sounds too personal, and then publish raw after that. I think that would probably work. It doesn't solve the problem of the deluge problem where people get overwhelmed and it becomes white noise and it doesn't really mean anything. And then we talked about some tools I could use for publishing, different apps and AI tools and publishing platforms. It would probably be like a simple workflow where I just paste my notes into an AI tool, remove the private stuff, and then put it on Substack. Which is not to say that I actually want to do that. It was just something that I was ideating. It was also extraordinarily helpful to talk this out with Gemini. It definitely seemed like it helped to figure out my process. I think I would have figured this out eventually, but it would have taken me quite a bit longer to work through it by myself. And then I was asking about how the real problem actually seems that the problem with being a researcher is that as a researcher, you curate things. And curation seems like the wrong model. Instead, I want to be more like a model where collaborate with people instead of work against them. And I think so. This is what I was thinking towards the end of the discussion, and I think this is probably what I'm going to think about in future. Is essentially, I think that there might be an alternative model. I've noticed this a bunch of times in the minimizing dynamics. There's always a way of doing things that seems like it makes sense, and the only reason it seems like it makes sense is because nobody has found a better way of doing it. And usually it's everyone loses something in this thing, doing things that feels like makes sense. It's always like the minimizing path. A minimizing way of approaching life always feels like you're making huge trade-offs, but you don't know what else to do. And then the maximizing way of doing life, you don't make any trade-offs, but usually it's difficult to know and understand the maximizing path. It's not intuitive. Often it is treated as heresy by people who embrace the minimizing path. And so I was thinking about, what if there was an alternative way? What if you just got a whole bunch of researchers who collaborated instead of work against each other? So for example, in science, most people think that science is collaborative, but it's not. It's only after publishing that it's collaborative. Before publishing, scientists are extremely secretive because they are trying to be the first one to publish. And if they aren't the first one to publish, then they don't get any credit, they don't get any success. So what if you threw that out the window? What if you could just imagine, for a certain scenario or maybe a certain amount of time, all scientists stopped worrying about being the first across the finish line and everyone just collaborated on what they were currently working on instead of gatekeeping. And imagine how much that would accelerate science. And I intuit that there's probably a different way of doing it. There's probably a way of doing that where the incentives don't come from being the first across the finish line. They probably just come from another place. And I don't know what that place is, but I think if I can find it, I could probably invite people into my process, because I think the only way that I can do my process is to be open and collaborative and not to be a gatekeeping curator, because it both does not work for me and doesn't really work for anyone else. So that's what I was thinking about. Quick overview. This is day 1 of 7 days of asking the most relevant questions. So I just finished doing some research with Gemini about the best places to live in the world. And at first I was asking the best places to live in the world. And then Gemini was like, what do you mean about, what do you think of as being the most important things? And I was like, let's start with healthcare and education. And then Gemini was like, so the Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, I think is what it said. Scandinavian countries. are routinely ranked as being the best places to live in the world. And then we were talking about that, and then I was like, wait, hold up. So why doesn't everybody move there? And then what is the immigration process? And then we start talking about easiest places to immigrate to that have free healthcare and good education. And it was talking about Canada and Costa Rica. And then I was like, oh, okay, so why did so many people stay in America instead of moving elsewhere if there are other places that are better to live? And I was talking about how there's unprecedented socioeconomic opportunities in America, basically. America has the best, I don't know, opportunities when it comes to financial stuff. And then I was like, so let's say if I didn't want to leave America, but I just wanted to explore places that would be good, places that I would like to live. And essentially, it came down to, I think I would like to live in NYC. And then I was like, but I also, probably the best way to find out if I actually want to move to NYC or LA or anywhere else is just to visit. And then I was thinking about, but I think I could probably just figure out if I want to move there without visiting. And then we're talking about best ways to research what it's like to live there without actually needing to move. And then that's where we left off, talking about different ways of researching that, finding out about communities, the academic scene, because I am a philosopher, although I've never really integrated or interacted with academics at all. And also how to learn about the cultural scenes, different places, day in a life type of information, etc., amenities, and that's where the conversation left off. I might continue that tomorrow, or I might start a different line of research, but doing the research about moving to NYC might be what I do tomorrow because that seems very interesting to me. I want to make a voice note about what I learned yesterday, which was early for the last 2 days because I forgot to. So the first one was I was asking ChatGPT or Gemini about legal loopholes and how is the average person supposed to know what is legal and not legal in the world. And I guess the main topics I was wondering about are mostly just drug related offenses because I feel like easily half the people that I know are consuming illicit substances on occasion, usually only for special occasions. And I don't know a single person who I think has a drug problem, but 99% of people that I know are consuming drugs. If it's not alcohol, then it's caffeine. And a lot of people don't think of alcohol as caffeine as drugs, but alcohol is probably one of the worst and most damaging drugs. And damn near everyone's drinking it all the time. And caffeine, I don't know, there's a lot of fucking substances in society. And anyways, I was just wondering, how is a normal person supposed to know how to react? Because I don't feel like any of the people that I know who are doing illegal drugs are prepared to get caught for it. Not a single one of them has thought about it and prepared for it. And I was just like, dude, this feels like a big fucking problem in the drug doing subculture. That people don't know how to handle getting caught. And it's not focused on, it's not thought about. And I think I might continue doing that research project at some point because I have no idea what is normal. I don't know what my rights are. I don't know how to figure out all this stuff. So that was the first thing. Second thing was I was wondering about which religions are essentially toxic because I think the one that I grew up in was very toxic, and I was doing an analysis of this. I think it's really interesting how a lot of religions use the same mechanism to essentially to escalate the importance of everything that they're saying. And it's usually like the afterlife and the importance of eternity, or at least it was in Christianity, and I think it is that way in a lot of other religions. They use the same mechanism to, it's both the healthy thing to do because I think it's important to think about when you're going to die and keep that in mind, and I think that's something that's kind of lost in modern culture is people don't really consider their death and don't live like it, and it's not healthy. And yet at the same time, these religions would also, it would be the cudgel they would use to keep people in line and to keep people coming back, and also the escalatory tool that they would use to draw in new people. And once you're in, once you accept the premise that they give to you that there's going to be an afterlife, then it's really hard to escape the conclusion that they present to you. And so I was asking which religions are like that, and they said Jehovah's Witness, Christianity, and the Church of Latter-day Saints are all commonly cited examples. And then I asked if it's not also Islam, and they said, yeah, it can be Islam. I think there might be some of that. I don't know. But anyways, I think that's probably some religions that are just not known for this. I think Buddhism is probably not likely to ever cause this kind of problem because I'm sure it could. But at the same time, Buddhism is famously, it's kind of more of a philosophy than it is a religion, and they don't proselytize, which means that everyone who becomes a Buddhist does it voluntarily without the looming threat of their eternal punishment hanging over their head. And it just seems so much more balanced and nice. I don't know. Today I did a little bit of research about the threshold at which how much income would you have to have beyond which buying a home no longer makes sense, and it makes more sense to invest your leftover money into the stock market instead of into a home. And it took a lot of prompting to get this information out of Gemini, because Gemini was like, it really depends on your risk tolerance, etc. But the more I pushed, the more it finally, I had to provide a very specific scenario and then adjust the numbers in order to get it to, I don't know, actually give not a yes or no answer, but probably yes and a probably no answer. And from what I gather, the threshold is probably around $200 to $250,000 in income. That's around the threshold where it might make more sense to not buy a house and invest in the stock market if you live in Sacramento rather than buying and owning. And then I think, generally speaking, anything beyond that $250,000 a year threshold is where it probably does make more sense to invest in the stock market rather than buy your own home, which is very interesting. This is a variable I've always wondered about. It's so nice to be able to do quick research with the LLMs these days. And that's it. So I want to make a overview of what I've researched in the last 2 days as the final installments in my 1 week life research project. So the first thing was, this was a side quest. I wanted to see how much spiritual healing and mysticism accounts for the number of jobs in America. And I didn't actually get information for America. I got information for the world, but apparently it's 0.5% to 1.5% of the global economy are people who specifically have jobs who are getting money from not based in science. And runs the range from religious and basically anything else that is like people money as their job from things that are not based in science. And what's interesting is that like the of this money comes from the traditional religions, and approximately 30% of the population of the world is religious, and a really high percentage of the people who are religious report giving money to their religion. It's about 90% of that 30% give money to their religion, which is interesting. Okay, the thing I researched is paternal age and autism risk, because this is something I learned about a while back, that you are as a father, the more it correlates, you're having the potential for autism. And I was like, oh shit, like I thought I want to, my kid's autism if I'm too old as a father. So I was thinking like maybe I should like freeze sperm or something. And then I looked into it, and apparently it's pretty negligible risk. So apparently, yes, as you get older, the risk of autism goes up, but it goes up in a very small amount. So like apparently risk of autism in general is about 1%. And you get older, that can to almost 2%. At paternal age, which is like 60s. Yes, the of autism in your child increases as you get older, but it's not like dramatic. So that's interesting thing. Another thing that I researched is okay, I actually a couple of days researching business, because I've had like all business questions in my mind for a long time. Like, what's it like to start a small business? What is it like to start a business with employees? What is the difference like tax different from business law considerations, different from just normal legal considerations? Like, and why is it that everyone expected to understand the laws of the society that they live in, but also no one is given any mandatory education on that? It seems like a double standard. And I guess that's all I have to say about it. I researched it. I looked into it a little bit. I some stuff. It really piqued my curiosity about how like of business and legal stuff is very gamifiable. There's a lot of rules, and it seems like of getting wealthy is in small part just function of knowing the rules of doing business. And if you know the rules of doing business, you probably also know the loopholes. And if you know the loopholes, then you can probably grow your wealth faster than anyone else who is not, in rules of doing business. And it's a really interesting thing. I'll probably be looking more into that. Another thing that I looked into was gaps education, and why they've been so long standing. Like, it's like everyone knows that school teach you everything that you need to know as a child, and yet that has been the case for quite some time. And yet, like, they're not in my lifetime been any huge movement to change the school system to be well-rounded. So this includes things like mental, social health, like general, like financial and understanding, and legal literacy and understanding, like all the above stuff actually seems like pretty basic and fundamental, foundational. And then also there also seems to be, in my mind, an overemphasis on learning things just to learn them instead of like broader skill sets. And also, I think like another on top of this, this is just my personal. I wasn't researching this, but like another on top of this is that like I think people are taught to want go into business. Most people are taught to be an employee, which in my mind, it's if you choose to be an employee, if you've had the education to also be a business owner, it's really to only teach someone to be an employee and assume that they don't want to be a business owner when that is like the half of the coin. And yeah, so I don't know. Anyways, this was a really beneficial research project, and I think I'm probably going to make another commitment to do something similar, and just research every day a question that I think is useful and interesting. Like there's a couple of things that I sort of about for a long time and just like never sort of like bothered assuage the worry because it seemed like super urgent and relevant. And I think I want to keep doing this research project. There's a bunch of like threads in this research project I would like to continue following. I want to learn, I want to see if I can research what it's like to live in New York City and also in LA without ever having actually lived there. I want to know if I can figure out what it's actually like to live there. And then I'll probably actually also drive down to LA at some point and try and live there for a bit and see if my research actually bears out in practice. And then I'll probably use that as a benchmark for to New York City eventually. And also same with business stuff. I'm having a strong feeling ever since I started doing this research project that like business knowledge is intensely philosophical, which my so like could be the stuff that I've done will translate to business, but it also might not be. I think like doing well is a very similar sort of process to the kind of work that I'm doing now, which is like there's a lot of hidden gotchas, there's a lot of philosophical underpinnings, and there's also like a lot of ways of approaching it. And also every time you think you've got it right, often there is a better way of getting it right that you don't know about unless you make it your goal to continuously grow and improve. And yeah, it seems like that's a long time and felt it that the world of business is probably will end up because obviously it meets most needs. Like the understanding is really important, but it's only important for your personal life. The other half of the coin is it's important business life, and I think I'm probably switch gears eventually into the world of business and continue doing my philosophy work as a business somehow. And so about that. Anyways, that's it for the research project.